Imagine a modern corporation as a dense, high-speed network. Left unprotected, it takes just one unpredictable external shock, a market crash, a supply chain collapse, or a cyber attack, to trigger a cascading failure across the entire system. You cannot steer an enterprise of that complexity on instinct alone. Modern corporate governance requires a standardized, reliable mechanism to capture and mitigate enterprise risk before it breaks the system. That is the role of the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations of the Treadway Commission, better known as Coso. They developed the definitive global standard for internal control frameworks. This is an operational necessity. Regulatory bodies and legal requirements frequently mandate recognized frameworks like Coso to design and operate internal control systems. Managing risk through fragmented, ad hoc methods often leaves gaps in oversight when facing these interconnected threats. Navigating this complexity requires a holistic, proven architecture. When people hear internal controls, they usually picture a static, two-dimensional compliance checklist. But a flat list of rules cannot possibly capture the dynamic, interconnected reality of a modern enterprise. The Coso model rejects the checklist entirely. Instead, it operates as a three-dimensional matrix, specifically designed to map an organization's high-level objectives directly against its structural reality. To understand how this works, we are going to reverse engineer this matrix from first principles, watching how each dimension locks together. Memorizing the parts of a framework is not the goal. Professionals must develop a structural intuition for how the matrix functions to protect an organization. This diagram represents the highest-level targets an entity must hit to remain viable. We start by building the first dimension. First are the operations objectives. These dictate the efficiency and effectiveness of the entity's daily business activities and safeguard its assets. Next are the reporting objectives. These demand absolute reliability, timeliness, and transparency in both internal and external financial and non-financial reporting. Finally, the compliance objectives. This is the strict, uncompromising adherence to all applicable local, national, and international laws and regulations. Together, these three distinct categories form the strategic top face of our architectural model. Without these specific targets clearly defined from the start, any internal control system is aiming in the dark. To achieve those three objectives, an organization must build out the supporting infrastructure, the 5 core components of internal control. These layers are the control environment, risk assessment, control activities. To be deemed effective, the system must pass a strict 2-part threshold. First, every component and its related principles must be present. They must exist in the documented design and implementation of the control system. Second, they must be functioning. The components must actively operate with continuous effectiveness in the daily reality of the business. A system that is merely present is just a paper shield. Only a framework that is both present and functioning can intercept enterprise risk. Risk does not restrict itself to the executive boardroom. Therefore, the control framework must penetrate through the entire company. We extend the structure along a third axis to represent the operational hierarchy, the entity level, division, operating unit, and individual function. This image shows the final result, a 3-dimensional intersection of objectives, components, and structure. This is the universally recognized Coso cube. The application of this cube scales with the organization. A smaller company might rely on senior management's direct span of control, while a larger entity requires formal, deep structural mechanisms to maintain oversight. The depth dimension prevents operational blind spots, ensuring that controls scale from the C-suite down to the smallest functional unit. Even fully constructed, the system requires one final requirement to be effective: integration. The 5 components must operate together in an integrated manner. This means sharing data across the dimensional planes to collectively reduce risk. Driving this integration is senior management. They set the tone at the top, communicate expectations, evaluate deficiencies, and hold primary responsibility for the system's design and operation. They steer the corporate culture and ethical standards from a high vantage point, ensuring the rest of the structure aligns with their directives. But the execution requires everyone. Every single individual is expected to competently perform their assigned control activities and report any weaknesses upwards. And while a company can outsource specific tasks or even its internal audit function, the ultimate responsibility for internal control cannot be transferred away from the organization. The Coso matrix is a highly precise architectural blueprint, but it sits dormant until human vigilance and continuous communication power its integrations. There is a definitive boundary in corporate governance. The Coso framework does not provide absolute assurance of success. Instead, it operates on the threshold of reasonable assurance. The system is designed to reduce the risk of failing to achieve objectives down to an acceptable but non-zero level. This is because any internal control system is bound by inherent human and environmental limitations. The first limitation is the suitability of objectives. If management establishes unrealistic or flawed targets, the subsequent control system built around them will be ineffective. The second limitation is faulty human judgment. The entire matrix relies on people, leaving it vulnerable to simple human error and imperfect decision-making. Attempting to build a perfectly sealed control system is impossible, as it ignores the fundamentally unpredictable nature of the human operators running it. The third limitation involves routine breakdowns in control. Systems fail due to everyday realities like employee misunderstandings, carelessness, or fatigue. Fourth is management override. Executives wielding authority can purposefully circumvent established controls to fraudulently hide liabilities or boost revenue projections. Fifth is collusion. Whether controls are manual or automated, they can be defeated if multiple employees coordinate to bypass them. Finally, the sixth limitation, external events. An organization remains at the mercy of uncontrollable forces outside its jurisdiction, like sudden economic shifts or natural disasters. These external shocks can abruptly destabilize an otherwise functional system. The Coso internal control framework provides the architecture for risk management, but it is a tool, not a cure. Its efficacy relies on the integrity and operational discipline of the humans wielding it.